Well, hello, America, and welcome to the Glenn Beck program. Tonight's show is being supported by our good friends at Deseret Book, and it is all about combining two things that don't seem to go together anymore, kids and reading. If you're a parent, ask yourself when the last time your kids asked if they could get up from the dinner table and go into the other room and get back to their novel. I can't think of a time. Unless it was assigned to them. Now, part of that is our fault. It is easier to let them go play in the other room with the Xbox, which I just got rid of, and the Wii. You got to trust me on this one, get rid of them. It's easier for them to text on the cell phone and us just to dismiss it because that's how kids are talking nowadays. Don't do it. It is difficult to get them to try to read and engage in a conversation about a storyline with you. But part of that is that there aren't a lot of great stories out there, at least ones that you're probably comfortable with connecting on a level with your kid. I mean, if you're cool with, pregnancy and drugs and suicide and vampires, then you're all set with your teenage kid. But what else is out there? Is there anything good? Tonight I want to introduce you to a book in a series of books that might just change your entire family's relationship with reading. It is called Michael Vey. Its author is Richard Paul Evans. He is a guy who sold something, how many? 7, 10 billion books? How many books?
I think we're like 17 million.
17 million. You know how many books I've written? I haven't sold 17 million books. That's a lot of books. He called me 18 months ago?
Yeah,
18 months, almost 2 years ago, and said, Glenn, I wrote a book, and I feel like this one just kind of came to me, and I feel like you're supposed to have it. He said, but I know you can't publish anything. He didn't know the week before I had signed a deal with Simon & Schuster to become my own publisher, and they would become a distributor. And I said, don't be so hasty. And he said, I just feel you should read this. I think this book's, you're supposed to publish it. And we'll get into the story of why he said that in just a few minutes. But I read this book, and there's nothing worse than a friend giving you something and saying, I'm so excited about it. Tell me what you think. And you're like, oh, no, please let it be good. And it's great. I gave it to my daughters. I gave it to my wife. I gave it to my friends. I gave it to Pat. I loved it. So Mercury Inc. Is the publisher of this book. The reaction last summer to book one was instant and overwhelming. Michael Vey hit the #1 slot on the New York Times list in its first week, remained in the top 10 for over a month. Our partners at Simon & Schuster tell us that it was their fastest selling title of a new series in their history. Simon & Schuster, by the way, is the largest publishing house on planet Earth. Now, 1 year later, the sequel has finally arrived. It is already a bestseller, and I was just told right before we went on that last year, book #1 is also climbing the charts and in the top 10. We have an audience full of people who read the book. Everybody read the book, right? Okay. And you are calling, or are they naming themselves? When we were at the Dallas Cowboy Stadium a couple weeks ago.
Vaniacs.
Vaniacs. Would you guys consider yourself Vaniacs? Oh, yeah. They'll tell you a little bit more about why they are enthusiastically calling themselves Vaniacs and why they prefer Xbox over, or why they prefer this over Xbox any day of the week. And you'll learn why this book connects on so many levels, why teachers are now using it in classrooms, why entire families waited hours. Who waited in line at Restoring Love? Okay? It was a quarter of a mile long just to be able to get their hands on an early copy of this book. There's something happening with this book. If you're ready to stop fighting with your kids over text message limits and start instead fighting over who's going to get to read the book next, this show is for you. I'm reading the first one because my kids are 7 and 8. My youngest, I'm reading the first one. I'm just finishing it up with them now. I told the story earlier on the air this week that my son, who is 8, we were just about finished with it last night. And I said, we have to finish this because the new book comes out tomorrow. And he said, new book comes out tomorrow. And I said, yeah. And he said, Dad, like he's not buying any of my BS. Dad, it's been sitting on our counter for over a week. I'm like, I promise I didn't steal it. I promise I didn't steal it. It is a great, great book. Richard Paul Evans, author of Michael Vey 2, Rise of the Elgin, is here with us now. First of all, let's start with impressions of the book. Your first thoughts on it, on why you enjoyed it. Anybody? Yes, Sean.
I kind of thought it was a really interesting concept. I wasn't quite sure where it was going to go, so I kind of started reading into it, and I thought...
Did you read the first one?
I read the second one first.
Okay.
Because we had to get the first one on the Kindle, but I was drawn in by the electricity aspect of it and how a human-made machine could somehow make somebody superhuman.
Okay, hang on. Let me start here. Who read the first one? Okay, so almost everybody. No, wait. Who read the first one first? Who read them in sequence? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So really, Sean, you're pretty much alone. Did it play? Did you understand the characters and everything that was going on? If you read the second one first?
It was really easy to understand and pick up on what was going on. I thought the summary on the book's binding was really helpful in that. There was a couple things that caught me by surprise,
right.
Like the thing with Grace, where she didn't show up until the very end. I was like, "Where's Grace? Oh no,
right.
What's going on?" And,
well, thank you for wrecking it for everybody. Now we know Grace is okay. Have you thought? He said he just thought the synopsis on the inside sleeve was good. The first one. Did you think about just writing a synopsis of the first one instead of?
Well, no, because I put the backstory in there too. So when you start reading it, Michael says this is what my story would sound like now, and that was added on so people who are just coming onto this book for the first time could actually read book 2 without reading book 1. But you'll definitely want to go back and read book 1.
Yeah. Who else has something off the top of their head of why they thought this book was different? Or yes, Melanie. Hang on just a second. Go ahead.
We started reading it together as a family and passing the book around, and then we couldn't put it down. And it's like, we don't want to wait until Daddy gets home to read it, because it's like, gotta know what's happening. They were all excited about it.
I will tell you that some would say that that's happened in my family as well.
Yeah.
That Daddy was reading and was like, yeah, Mom's busy. Come on, let's just keep reading. And she's had to catch up herself. It's addictive. And you were going to say?
It was just the kids could identify. They looked at the kids, and we homeschool, so it's already they're different anyhow from the rest. And it's like all of a sudden, hey, we don't have to be like everybody else. They could identify with each different kid in a different way.
It is, and we talked about this on the radio show earlier this week. It is different that they're not superheroes, but yet they kind of are. And the Michael, the lead character, is a guy who some would classify as handicapped. I mean, he's got a serious disorder.
He has Tourette syndrome.
Right. Which you have.
Which I have. And my son, Michael, who I wrote the book for, has.
Right. And so that's not something that usually, you don't see Spider-Man with Tourette's. Right. And he's beat up, which Spider-Man is beat up. But this is kind of a different scenario entirely. Even the kids who in the first book beat up Michael, you understand them. So it's almost kind of like and I say this as a lifelong loser, it's kind of like the Losers Club. It's kind of like all of us who are just like regular club, I guess, not Losers Club, but the Regulars Club, where we're like, okay, I can't relate to the cheerleader. I mean, she's nice, but I never met a cheerleader. I shouldn't say this, my wife was a cheerleader. Besides my wife, who I didn't meet in school, I never met a cheerleader who was nice, I was never part of that crew, so you kind of feel you connect with the people.
I had a man show up at a book signing, and he obviously had Tourette syndrome. He was ticking pretty hard, and he said, you know what, Mr. Evans, for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm part of the in crowd. And I thought, that was great.
What was it like growing up with Tourette's, and what's it like for your son?
It's horrible. was horrible. I think on some level we're more tolerant now because we have more labels to put on him. It's like, oh, he has Tourette syndrome. When I was little, I was just weird. And so when I first moved to the state of Utah from Los Angeles, my mom sent me on a bus up to a summer camp, and someone noticed me ticking pretty hard. I was nervous and didn't know anyone, and when I got off the bus, the whole bus surrounded me, and someone said, look, he's a freak. And of course, my ticks are going crazy, and they're like, look what he's doing, look. And that was pretty tough. It was pretty tough.
Your son has it.
Michael has struggled with it even more than I have. His Tourette's is more severe, but I also see him growing to be a really wonderful young man.
How does it manifest? Because everybody always thinks Tourette's is like a character in a movie that either shouts out swear words or,
I have that impulse. It's corporeal. I have the impulse to spit in the face of famous people. That's why Glenn...
He told me that first time we actually sat face to face, we were on CNN. And I said, how does this with you like right now? And he said, I have a real big urge to spit in your face. Yeah. And I'm like, you're not alone. You're in New York City. A lot of people have that.
Well, I was actually in the Oval Office, and I had to step away from the President of the United States for that reason. Carrie knew, she stepped in, my wife, and stepped in and talked to him, because I was like, I can't hold, I'm literally biting my tongue and walking away. It's like, because the pressure was so strong to do
Seriously?
something. Yeah.
And your son, do you mind? How does it manifest with him? Is it different with everybody?
Yeah, it is, because it's a neurological disorder. With Michael, he's had a lot of behavioral challenges, and he kind of processes things a little bit different. Very smart, extremely smart, and thinks a lot about things, some OCD. He does have tics, and that's about it. I mean,
so how do you... we'll get to the book here in a second, but how do you conquer? Because if I didn't know, I wouldn't know. With you.
Yeah.
Do you grow out of it? Do you control it more?
No, it varies. If you were to go back and look at the tape of me, I saw first time I was on the Today Show, I was ticking like crazy, and that's all I could see were my ticks. I have friends who didn't know I had Tourette syndrome because you kind of mask the movements. Michael would drop his pen on the ground when he really needed to tick. It's like an itch.
Did you do that? Is that what you did? Are these things that Michael's doing what you did or your son does?
Yeah, the things are Michael has the exact same Tourette symptoms that I have. Yeah. But you don't grow out of it. But it comes and goes. When I was 20, it was extremely severe. You'd be uncomfortable sitting next to me, maybe. And when I was in high school, I had vocal tics. So if I go to a movie, I'd be going the whole movie, and eventually someone would turn around and say, "Shut up," and I wouldn't even realize I was doing it.
That must have sucked. Yeah, I mean, I know that's an understatement.
Yeah, but Glenn, I am so grateful that I had Tourette syndrome, that I have Tourette syndrome, and I see these wonderful youth around the country that come to my book signings who have Tourette syndrome and say thank you. One kid told me, it's like, you've made it cool to have Tourette syndrome. Thank you so much. And also kids who are autistic are coming to my signings. And it's really fascinating. It's like, how cool that they can relate to this character. It's like, this kid's a superhero. And he has Tourette's like me. I can be something great.
Richard called me up, and I can remember I was sitting in my office in New York, and he called me up and he said, I have this book, and I don't know if we've ever really shared this on the air, but Simon & Schuster made me change the ending of the Christmas sweater. And the Christmas sweater, the way I had it, was the way I wanted it. But I had to exchange one book for them. I had to give them, I think, an inconvenient book and say, you just do this one for free, but you have to publish this one, because I believed in that one so much. But they didn't like the ending, because the ending was true. And I couldn't write another ending. And we had met. And we talked on the phone. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. We talked on the phone for quite some time. And the ending of the Christmas sweater and the fixes all the way through it to get to that ending, he wrote. Because I couldn't do it. And he was on the phone and he had an inspiration and he was like, I got it, I'll call you back. And did that. So when he called me, we had been friends, and he called me in New York, and he said, I have this book I want you to read. And he said, and I had just signed the deal to be a publisher, and I was praying, how do I get books out that kids can read, that don't treat kids like morons, that we can get good values out without it being a values book. Phone rings. And he says, Glenn, I think this was written for you, and nobody gets it. Nobody gets it. I brought it to publishers, and they don't get it. And they want me to dumb it down. And I said, let me read it. And I said, dumb it down? I think it's too dumb the way it was. Bring it up a level. Let's treat young adults like young adults. You know, George Washington was surveying at 15 years old. And
the line I love that you said is, if they don't understand it, get a dictionary.
Yeah. That's what my parents used to say all the time. And I think it was because they didn't know the meaning of the word themselves. They'd say, look it up. I'm not going to help you. And when we first decided to print it, it was kind of scary because I think we both felt really good about it, but nobody else had any faith in this.
The bookstores didn't think it would sell. They hardly bought any copies.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I think because the publishing world plays the same way little kids play soccer. The ball goes over here and everyone runs over there. Oh, we're doing wizard books. Oh, now we're doing vampire books. This was not what was out there. And so when I did my first book, The Christmas Box, it's ironic, my #1 bestsellers have all been rejected by publishers because it was different. And so we were pioneering with this. We knew something. We let kids read it. We let 500 students read the book before we took it to them. And every teacher in every school reported it was the most popular book that had ever gone through their school. So we knew, we had field study. They didn't care. It didn't look like a successful book. The day this hit #1, USA Today did an article saying, what is the next big seller? Didn't even mention my book.
Wow.
Mentioned my editor's book, what he had just written, but didn't even mention this book. It's like, and guess what? Every single book on their list looked like Hunger Games. Every single one of them. And I just smiled because I remember going through the same process with The Christmas Box that went on to sell 8 million copies and be one of the biggest books of the century.
Will you tell the story on that? Because this is an amazing... Have you ever read The Christmas Box? Marissa?
I have it.
You have it? Yeah.
We'll read it at Christmas time.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? And it's a short little story. Do you know the story behind it, Marissa?
No, I don't.
Okay. Listen to the story of how The Christmas Box happened. 8 million copies sold.
I was 29 years old. I had just run for the state legislature, lost by 100 votes. And the best loss I've ever had in my life, because I suddenly had this time on my hands. And so I sat down to do something I'd always wanted to do, and that is write a book. And I thought, what should I write? And I thought, well, what am I most passionate about? I thought, my kids. I was a father with 2 beautiful young daughters, 5 and 3, Jenna and Allie. That I'm going to write a book about how parents love their children. When I wrote it, I went to Kinko's copy centers, made up 20 copies, handed them out. Didn't think anything of it, thought I was done. But within weeks, those 20 copies had been read hundreds of times. And bookstores start calling with orders for my book. So that's when I sent it to publishers, local publishers, who all rejected the book. Because they said a book like this will never sell. But I'm getting so many requests that I self-published the book. And within 6 weeks of coming out in the state of Utah, it was the #1 book in the state of Utah. The next year, it hit #2 on the New York Times bestseller list as a self-published book. And that's when my whole world exploded.
Hang on just a second. Consider that. A self-published book, #2 on the New York Times bestseller list. And everyone said, it won't work. Let me talk to the kids. What do you learn from that story? Marissa.
That you can do anything you put your mind to. You don't have to have the approval of other people.
Exactly right. And most people, if you tie what you just said to what is happening in the book sales right now, if it's not a vampire or a Hunger Games book, they don't want to publish it because that's what's hot, and so everybody wants to do that. Most people they're ruled by fear, and they're ruled by the fear of failure, failure's good. You just said it a minute ago. He wrote that book because he failed in his political
Aspirations.
aspirations. I'm glad you failed.
Me too.
You would have sucked. You would have sucked. But at least you'd still have your soul. When we come back, I want to get into the the story of Michael Vey and get to the audience questions here in just a second, and also talk a little bit about why do you think that grades are going up from kids reading this series? The teachers are reporting grades are going up. We'll get into that next. We want to go on to Skype here for a second. Logan Pickrell is 11 years old. Last year, he and his family moved to Costa Rica, having a hard time adjusting. The one thing that helped him get through it was reading the first Michael Vey. Logan now joins us via Skype from Costa Rica. He's joined by his mother, Sherry. Hi, Logan. Hey, Sherry.
Hi. Hi, how are you doing?
Good. How are things in Costa Rica?
They're good. Actually, a little rainy right now. We're in the middle of rainy season.
We could use some of that up here. Sherry, tell me the story. Tell me what happened a year ago.
Well, just about a year ago, we moved to Costa Rica for my husband's job. He works at the U.S. Embassy here, and we had lived in Houston for 9 years. So really, that was all our children really knew as home. And of course, they weren't really excited about moving to another country, and we had to live in a hotel room for 2 months while we were waiting on our stuff to arrive. So it was, a difficult transition. And my husband, David, had downloaded the book on the iPad, and they started reading it together. And just a little background, Logan is not a reader. He would never prefer to do that over video games or other things, but the book really grabbed his attention, and it was great because it gave us something to do in the hotel instead of listening to Spanish TV channels that we didn't understand. And he loved it. And in fact, a lot of times they were reading, and David said it's time to go to bed, and he was like, no, you got to keep reading, and he'd grab the book or grab the iPad and keep reading a little longer. So that was a big deal for us because he doesn't love to read.
Are you a reader now, Logan?
I have gotten into the Hunger Games. I'm on the last one, the Mockingjay, so I guess
A little
if
more.
I have to, like at night, pretty much, more at night than in the day.
What was the difference between that and the Hunger Games to you? Why would you say you've just gone through the Hunger Games, but you would consider yourself a reader like you were on Michael Vey?
Well, because since there are so many of the Hunger Games, it kind of, with all three of them together, that compared with, they pretty much equal in similarity, but with all three together, because Michael Vey was pretty much the only reason I still read now. Yeah, I've been looking for books like that type. Right as we finished it, I quickly got on the laptop and tried to look it up, but I saw that the other one wasn't coming out for a while, so I had to find it.
It just came out this week, as you know, and Richard here has something for you.
Logan, I have a surprise for you. I have a copy of Rise of the Elgin signed to you. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna send it out right away, so you will have it, so you can start reading. You can start reading that. And may I just say, as a book collector, may I suggest, if anybody has anybody ever tried to buy Harry Potter, first edition Harry Potter? I have. It's insane. I don't own. I own books from the 1600s. I don't own a Harry Potter book. Insane. And may I suggest you buy 2 just in case, and put 1 away, because I have a feeling this is going to be huge, and especially a signed one. You might want to.
I ordered one from Amazon, so we'll have one that he can take to school and read, and one that doesn't leave the house.
Perfect.
That will be the autograph one. That's
Perfect. Thank you, guys. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can anybody, as an adult, tell me what you got out or what you saw coming out of your, Sharon, out of your kids.
Well, my kids love to read anyway, and I'm always feel like I'm desperate to try to find the next series, because when it's just one book would end and then I'd be scrambling to try to find something else. And so when the first book came out, I got it for them and they just devoured it, and then I read it and I realized that it was a little bit different than, they were really interested in a lot of the fantasy type books, but they like the Percy Jackson type books, but this was something, like you said, just kind of the normal kid, the normal group that seemed as on their own to just be kind of normal, but when they were together, they were this great force that accomplished so much, and the kids were just thrilled by it.
Did you read it with them?
They read it first, then I read it.
Who read it first as a parent? You. Okay. How old are your kids?
You talking to me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have, at home right now, I have 2 teenagers, an 18 and a 15-year-old. This is my 15-year-old next to me here.
Okay.
And actually, that was one of the reasons I wanted to buy it last year. So I bought Michael Vey, the first book, and I tried to get my son Rylan to read it. I still have not succeeded with that. He is into Xbox and games a lot.
May I suggest this is how you do it. Whatever you do, do not read this book. This is bad for you. It'll corrupt everything that you hold dear. That's the way I would suggest it.
Friend that will tell him that it's good, because he won't listen to me.
Yeah, I see a lot of that. When the adults are recommending it, the kids are going, "Oh no, must not be good." Kind of like, this food's good for you. It's like, that's the food you don't eat. So there's kind of this delay. And I'm hearing from the kids directly saying, "Well, my grandmother gave it to me, and so I didn't read it. And then I picked it up one day, and it really was good." So
you know what? That was one of the things we had a discussion, and I think you and I were on the same page. And again, the publishing house was not. I wish I would have brought. I have what's called a galley, which is a soft copy that is just the quick read it to see if it's any good. It has a cartoon on the front, and it was originally called Michael Vey and the Electric Cheerleader.
That's true.
And I immediately hated it.
So did they.
and it had a cartoon on it. And the first thing I did is we hired this artist, and I changed the name from Electric Cheerleader to Prisoner of Cell 25, and then made this really dark. And I did it for your son, because I knew if it was the Electric Cheerleader and it had a cartoon and it looked happy, nobody would want it. They want to drink blood. So we have to give them the gateway drug of, oh, there might be some blood drinking in this. And then if they get to the end and they're like, there was no blood drinking, but I like this book. Yeah. It's kind of stealth. Yes. Go ahead, yes.
I found out how to make her do her summer reading. She couldn't start Michael Vey till she finished. So she got it done really fast.
I have used that with my son just yesterday. Sharon, you were going to say something a minute ago? Do you remember?
No, I was just saying that when they started reading it, they couldn't wait for the next book to come out. And when they heard it was coming out, of course, they're telling me, can we get it, can we get it, can we get it? And I'm like, well, it's going to be coming out. Let's wait till it comes out on paperback. And then when I saw that we had the opportunity to read it, they were doing like the happy dance all over the house because they were so excited that they were going to be able to read the book. And she finished it in about a day and a half as soon as she got it. 4 hours or so.
Wow.
Very
4
quickly.
hours.
I stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning.
She just went right through it.
Wow.
So.
Wow. You like the first one better or the second one?
Second one.
Okay. Mark, did you and Rose, did you read it together?
Rose read the first one when it first came out, I guess, because you suggested it a while back, and then my sister
Wait. You took my recommendation?
And then, and roles are reverse here. Rose reads all the time, and I've read probably 7 books in my life, and these 2 books I read in one weekend. So
Wow.
I don't read books, so.
What was the deal? Why?
Well, because my sister said, these books coming out, and we get to be on your show.
Well,
It sounded good.
It sounded good up until I should have stopped while we were ahead.
So now I'm waiting for the next one. I mean, it's
You can't be on my show.
I don't care. Now I'm hooked.
Good. What is the message of these books? Let me ask the kids first. What is the message of Michael Vey? Yes, in the back.
I actually read the first one twice. I read it first because I knew you recommended it, and I'd heard of Richard Paulina's. I read a few of his books, and I really enjoy his writing. And I remember you mentioned it on your show, and so I was like, okay, I'll try it. You said it was a good book, it had lots of values and principles, and I picked it up and I read it, and I was like, this book it's teaching me nothing. It's just a fun fiction book. I was like, this is the greatest book ever. But I was like, what the heck is this teaching me? And I picked it up again and I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like scripture. It's teaching me so much. And I could not believe the principles. And I didn't even realize it the first time I read it that it really was affecting my life. And I didn't even recognize it at first. It was amazing.
Very good. Very good. Anybody else? Can you tell me what it teaches you? Yes, Rebecca.
How much he loved his mother and everything, and how that you can get along with people and values and stuff, and principles. And
The mom. Where is the mom? I mean, is that just like a Disney trick? Because it's always with the Disney. There's always an orphan, and
I know.
I mean, where did the mom story come from? Do you know?
I don't know, because Michael was close to his father, and I wanted to shape him, because when he loses his father, I had a friend when I was in 4th grade who lost his father. I remember thinking that is the worst thing that could happen in the world, and I remember how much it changed him. And so I really used that for Michael, because that makes Michael a very serious young man and very shy, but he's also very close to his mother. And the 7th grade teacher who wrote the curriculum, the first one to read it, she goes, I read that book in a day. I was supposed to be teaching, I couldn't put it down. And she's the one who ended up using it with 3 different classes. She said, what shocked me the most about this book was that the boy loves his mother, and he's not afraid to tell people. And I said, that shocked you? She goes, I've never seen that in the book. He just flat out loves his mother.
That is a flashback to at least if you're my age, from when we were growing up, things were like that. Has anybody watched Little House on the Prairie recently? Or is you like it? Yeah. I mean, that is such a bizarre show to watch now, because you realize how different television and storytelling is, and how respect for parents just was there. And it's not now when you read something about a boy, teenage boy, who loves his mother, respects his mother. It's unusual.
Yeah, you notice Michael always uses sir or mister when he's talking, even if he doesn't like the person, Mr. Dahlstrom. And it's just a small thing, but it's throughout the book. It's like he's been taught to respect. And I wanted to make sure, I thought if I write a book for young adults, I am not going to make adults idiots. I can watch the Disney Channel if I want that. It's like the adults are going to be real people, and they're going to have healthy relationships. Otherwise, I'm not interested. I'm not going to do what they're doing.
But you didn't treat the kids as idiots either.
No.
That's the difference. I mean, when has anybody seen who homeschools here? Okay. Have you ever looked at the curriculum from the 1800s?
Some of the books you said to order. Yeah.
What'd you say?
Some of the books you said to order, the primers and the
They're
dictionary.
impossible, aren't they? There's stuff that came from the 1800s that were for, 4th graders that make your head hurt. Where society expects less from teenagers or even 8-year-olds than what we should expect. And when you start to expect more, what a surprise. They rise to the level. I think of this all the time when I think of the founders and how Ben Franklin at 9, I think he was 9. Anybody know? Was he 9 when he went to work? Because he got in trouble with his father for stealing rocks. And his father was like, oh, you stole some rocks? Really? Whose rocks are those? And he's like, I don't know, they're rocks. And he's like, no, those were put there in a pile for somebody else, and you took that pile of rocks, and you shouldn't have done it. You know what? Maybe it's time you get a job. And he's like, wait a minute. And he goes to work, and I think he was 9 years old. I told my son the other day, you know, you're going to get a job. I'm going to get you a job. You're going to get a job. He went white. And everybody who was in the room looked at me like I was a crazy madman saying that your son's going to get a job. That's the way our founders did it.
Yeah.
In the 1800s, you actually went out and got a job. It was good. We have taken our kids and, in our mind, dumbed them down. They're way bright, as I can see from your children. Way bright. Back in just a second. I want to ask Richard to tell a little bit of the story of book 2 without giving anything away, if you can.
It's just a little tricky. The book 1 ends with Michael's mother is still gone, and the kids have just escaped from the Elgen Academy. And so book 2 starts out with them regrouping and making a plan. They're trying to find Michael's mother. They do find where she is. And the search for the mother leads them to South America. So they actually end up in the Amazon jungles, which is a lot of fun. It's a great setting, but also you find out what the Elgin are up to and what Dr. Hatch is up to, and his plan to take over the world.
You told me when we first talked about it, you said, Glenn, I feel like this is just coming out of my fingers. And you told me that there were a couple things that you wrote down in the middle, and we were like, I don't even know what that means.
Right.
And it was you'd hear in your own head, book 3.
Right.
Still happening to you?
Still happening. I've had days where I've written more than 6,000 clean words.
Wow.
Stunning. Just stunning to me. In fact, I was telling the audience before I came out, I'm writing this scene about there's this pipe they climb through in the jungle, and one of the guards says to him, be careful on the pipe, because at the end of the pipe there are vipers. And one of the proofreaders going through it said, how did you know that? He said, I used to be in the jungle by this factory, and the vipers would gather around the end of the pipes where the condensation was to get the water. I said, I don't know. It just came out.
Are you at all concerned that, because you say there, I mean, you knew on book 1, you told me this was a 7-book series, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You told me, Glenn, this is a 7-book series. And I was kind of like, oh, okay. How, I mean, is there any concern about 7 books?
Oh, yeah. I'm terrified. But it's a leap of faith. The fact that the book keeps coming to me, it's kind of, if I can see just one chapter ahead, then I'm good. If I'm writing the wrong thing, I trust that the book will stop coming.
Do you know how it ends?
No. No, I don't.
Really?
I really don't.
Do you know how, when you write, do you write, like when I write the ending. I know the ending first.
Many times.
Right. Do you know the ending? Did you know the ending of this?
No. No. I feel like I'm getting the story as the reader is. I'm writing the end section. I had to go back and clean it up because I'm writing so fast, and I'm so excited about what's going on. It's like I'm seeing this picture in my head, and I'm just trying to keep up with it.
All right, I'm going to go someplace I probably shouldn't, if I didn't want us both and all of us here to look like freaks. But where's that coming from? You think that's a God thing?
Yes. Yes. Wherever you want to attribute the inspiration of, even Stephen King says, I don't know where my books come from, but
I do.
He says, but I find them. He says they, but he says in his book on writing, he says it's more like I discover them. I'm just like an archaeologist, just dusting off the bones. The reporter said, I don't believe you. He said, that's fine, just as long as you believe that I believe this. The Christmas box, when I wrote that book, I didn't know what it was about until I was just about done with it, and suddenly everything fit together, and it became a global sensation. That's why I called you about Michael Vey. Because it's like, it's happening again.
I know, you told me that.
It's like, it's happening again. I don't know what this is. I didn't even tell my agent about it. When she read the book, I handed her a final copy. This is 90,000 words, almost 100,000 words, just twice as long as my normal novels. She said, when did you find time to write a novel of this length? It's more complex than my novels. It's highly complex. My daughter read it. She goes, Dad, where did this come from? It's like, this is pretty amazing. Do you realize some of the things you're putting in here and how it ties in?
Tell the story. How much time do we have? Okay. Tell the story about the the 3 kids in cell 25 from the first book, or is it, how many is it?
Michael's in cell 25, and then the 3 kids who are in
3
purgatory.
Kids, yeah, in purgatory. And tell a story about their names.
Oh, this is amazing. This is amazing. First of all, I put all the names came to me as I'm writing the book.
One you don't day, know.
Didn't know. Just wrote them down. Just wrote them down. It's like they just like, well, this guy's named this. I just knew it. This is Zeus. This is Ian. This is Ostin. So I write the names down. One day I'm looking at them, and I'm looking at the initials. I thought, this spells Mount Zion. I thought, well, let's look this up in the scriptures. It's like, it's about hope. And it stunned me. And then I thought, I was so taken by this, I thought, well, I would like to put this in.
Now, hang on just a second. You did not rearrange them to see what you could say. That you just made the list of characters.
It was out of order.
Okay.
I had the list of characters there. It was out of order, but all of a sudden I realized, I started seeing like Z-O-N, and it's like, wait a second, this spells Mount Zion.
Okay.
It's the only thing you could arrange it to. Mm-hmm. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I use that somewhere else in there? And I'm looking at these characters who are in purgatory, these kids who will not do what's wrong, so they've been locked away as punishment. There's Ian, who is all-seeing. He can see through electrolocation, so he can see through walls. We have Abigail, who can take away our pain and our hurt. She touches you, can stimulate nerve endings, and takes away pain. And then we have McKenna, who can create light and heat. And I thought, these have the same attributes of God. And then I looked at the initials together. I am.
He called me, when he called me and said that, if I'm not mistaken, you were watching an episode of mine, and like that week or something, and you told me that you heard me say, a reference, I am. And you said your hair stood up on you. Do you remember this at all?
I don't.
You were lying to me. You're a fiction writer. He said that he had heard the I am, and you had just discovered the I am in their name, and said it's a God thing. It's a God thing. Why do you think God? This sounds like such a ridiculous question, because how do you predict what God thinks? But why do you think God is doing this? If you believe this is a God thing, he's not a fiction writer.
No.
Why is he doing this?
Books are powerful things. Books become life scripts. Books change the world. Every major revolution has started with the book. My wife really struggled with the Christmas box until one day someone called her and she learned firsthand how many lives it had changed and how deeply lives were changed.
What do you mean she struggled with it?
Well, she just thought it was just something I was doing on the side. Initially, no one wanted to publish my book. And Carrie, she's rational. She's listening to everyone else. Hey, Rick, we're going to put our savings in this book? No one wants it. That should be a clue that it's not worth publishing, right? What do you know about publishing? Well, I know nothing about publishing. I've never published a book. Well, really? I'm supposed to trust you with our savings? And then someone called her, and it stunned her. She said, this book is changing lives. I said, yes. And so with Michael Vey, it was the same thing. I said, Carrie, I don't have time to write 3 books a year, no. But this one's being given to me, and I cannot not write it. So,
let me go back to her with the Christmas box, because when it did come time to finally sell it to a publisher, if I remember the story right, or you weren't making that one up. When you did finally sell it, they offered you a huge sum of money, and she said no. Is that right? My gosh.
Yes, I know what you're saying. I'm just
okay. Oh my gosh, this guy's whole life is a.
No, she didn't turn it down. What happened?
Well, no, she didn't want to take it.
What happened? We got the money, and she got scared. She goes, "Can we please give the money back?"
Okay.
Yeah, and that will say more about my wife than anything I could tell you. She said, I don't want this money. I don't want fame. It's like, what if this hurts our children? What if our children lose their values? She goes, can we please give it back? And I'm like, wait a second, honey, I was raised poor. It's like, this is good. And that was actually that conversation. We're sitting in our minivan in the parking lot of a financial consultant. I'll never forget it. And she's like sitting in the seat. I'm sitting almost on the ground. And it's like, why don't we start a charity? And that's where the Christmas Box House started, and which has housed more than 30,000 abused children.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay, back in a minute. We've spent an hour with Richard Paul Evans, New York Times bestselling author a zillion times, and a good, dear personal friend. The name of the book is The Rise of the Elgin. Best thing that has happened because of this.
Two things: kids are reading again and loving it, and second, that kids are believing in themselves.
It is a great series. Start with the first one. If you read the first one last year, the sequel is out. Rise of the Elgin, available in bookstores everywhere. From Dallas, good night, America.